Hello and good evening, everybody, and this is going to be episode 23 of Album Rant. And I thought this would be a very good time, or as good a time as any, to do my very first album rant on the band Kiss, who is one of my favorite artists ever. A glam rock band that originated back in the early 70s from the remnants of a band called Wicked Lester, and became one of the most phenomenal rock groups, one of the most popular rock groups ever in the history of music. And I thought that it would be a pretty good idea to focus tonight on their 10th studio effort entitled Creatures of the Night, released in 1982. But before I get to that, I kind of want to tell you how we got here. Well, as I said, they originated in the early 70s as part of the remnants of a band called Wicked Lester, and that was basically rhythm guitarist and lead vocalist Paul Stanley, and bass guitarist and lead vocalist Gene Simmons. And they were eventually joined by drummer and lead vocalist Peter Criss, and lead guitarist and much later lead vocalist Ace Frehley. And believe it or not, their first couple of albums, their self-titled debut in 1974, Hotter Than Hell in 1974, and Dressed to Kill in 1975 were not the big mega hits that we regard them as today. They really had a hard time getting their feet off the ground with those first couple of records. But everything changed in late 1975 when they released one of the greatest live albums ever, entitled Alive. And I am not fully sure how much of that was actually live and how much of it was tampered with in the studio. Your guess is as good as mine. All I know is it's a great album, it's great music, and it sounds good. And quite frankly, that is all I really care about. And that album, that double live album, put them on the map, and it made them household names. And from there on out, Kiss ruled the planet. And all throughout the mid to late 70s, they put out hit after hit. Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun. Then they made a follow-up to Alive, appropriately titled Alive 2. And it seemed that Kiss could absolutely do no wrong. Then 1978 happened, and what should have been one of the best money-making moves ever, every single member, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss, and Ace Frehley, they released a solo album on the same day. They were marketed as Kiss releases, but they were very much solo albums. None of the members had anything to do with any of the other three albums. And quite honestly, aside from Ace's solo album, they were varying levels of crap. I mean, Paul's was okay, but boy, Gene's and Peter's, those struggled. And after that, they kind of hit a plateau. They released a follow-up album in 1979 entitled Dynasty, and it really went in the pop rock direction. And by this point, Peter Criss was starting to show some very erratic behavior. He was actually barely on Dynasty. He was only on one song, and he was filled in for by session musicians. Then they released Unmasked, and Unmasked was even worse than Dynasty. I didn't hate Dynasty. I really do not like Unmasked. That was released in 1980, and even though Peter Criss was featured on the cover, he had nothing to do with the record. He was not on it. He was replaced by Anton Fig, and he was eventually replaced for the tour for Unmasked by drummer Carr. Then they decided for their next release to release a full-fledged rock album. No more pop rock, no more disco. They were going to get back to the basics. Well, that idea fell through, and instead they rejoined with producer Bob Ezrin, who did produce the Destroyer album, which was phenomenal, by the way, and he had most recently produced Pink Floyd's The Wall. And the band attempted to do their version or their idea or I guess I should say, they made an album that was very highly influenced by The Wall. It was not rock music. It was soft to moderate prog rock, and it sounded absolutely nothing like Kiss. Like I said, it was entitled Music from the Elder, and it was pretty bad. There were a few good songs, most namely the ones that Ace wrote, but Ace absolutely hated that album, and from that point on, he was basically winding down his involvement with the band, and that brings me to the subject of tonight's review, 1982's Creatures of the Night. And you can see the band right there on the cover. We have Gene Simmons on bass guitar and lead vocals. We have Paul Stanley on rhythm guitar and lead vocals. We have Eric Carr on the drums, and we have Ace Frehley, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second. But first of all, let's go ahead and flip over on the back, and let's take a look at side one. Now, the past three albums that Kiss had done, they were really trying to be quote-unquote respectful artists. They were trying to appeal to adult contemporary fans and prog rock fans, mostly. Ace Frehley described The Elder as a really bad Genesis album, and I kind of agree with him there. But from the very get-go, the title track is the first track on side one. Eric Carr kicks in with some monstrous drum intros, and you know straight off that this is a balls-to-the-wall rock album. This may even be a heavy metal album. I'm not sure if you would call this heavy metal, but it is definitely the closest the band has ever come to that genre. And you know, gone are the days of Dynasty. Gone are the days of Unmasked. Gone are the days of Music from the Elder. This is even heavier than those first six classic albums. And I gotta say, Creatures of the Night is a great title track. Paul Stanley sings this one, and like I said, it is a balls-to-the-wall anthem, and I absolutely love the title track. Then we move to the second track entitled Saint and Sinner, which is a little bit slower, and it's sung by Gene Simmons, but I really like it. It's dark, it's doomy, and it's got a really, really good rhythm to it. I have heard some people say they don't really like Saint and Sinner. I mean, yeah, it's not the strongest song on here, but the thing is, this entire album is pretty killer, no pun intended. And Saint and Sinner, I think, is a very, very good second track. Like I said, much, much slower, but Gene's vocals really, really do it justice and are very, very appropriate for the very slow rhythm. But then it kicks right back up with Keep Me Coming. Again, sung by Paul Stanley, just like the title track. And this thing is incredibly underrated. I love Keep Me Coming. Mostly due to the rhythm. Mostly due to the swinging beat it's got. And I love Keep Me Coming. I mean, I've loved every song on here so far. And Keep Me Coming just keeps me coming. But yeah, I mean, it's a great song, and it's a shame it's not more widely respected as it should be, but I definitely suggest checking it out. But then we move to the fourth track on side one, Rock and Roll Hell. Another very slow and demonically doomy song, and it's again sung by Gene, which makes sense because he has the lower voice, so it makes sense that he would sing a lot of these slower songs. Also, he wrote it. But apparently Rock and Roll Hell was written it was written about lead guitarist Ace Frehley, from what I understand. I've not really had the time to really analyze the lyrics, but it's great. It's a great slow song. Every single song on here so far has been phenomenal. It's got a very, very heavy production. Wow. Like I said, the past couple of albums were kind of glossy. This is not glossy at all. This is full-fledged hard rock, maybe even metal. Then it ends with Danger, sung by Paul Stanley. This is another very, very fast one, and I gotta be honest, it is probably the weakest track off of side one, and it's usually, if I'm going to skip one, it's usually going to be Danger. The chorus just doesn't really do much for me. It's just Paul Stanley going, danger, 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 and no offense or anything, I mean, it's still not a bad song or anything, but compared to what came before it, it's just not really getting the job done. But really, there's not a single dud off of side one. If I had to pick a favorite from side one, ooh, that's a tough decision. It's either the title track or Keep Me Coming. On today, I might be giving the edge to Keep Me Coming. A week from now, I may say the title track or Rock and Roll Hell, but I'm going to say Keep Me Coming right now. So that concludes side one. Then we move to side two, and side two kicks off with the anthemic I Love It Loud. Kicks off with yeah, yeah, yeah. They have played that song every single time I have seen them in concert. I have seen them in concert, I believe, 8 times now, ever since the year 2009. As long as it's not canceled, I'm going to see them one more time on their farewell tour in Knoxville over Thanksgiving weekend, and I fully intend to hear I Love It Loud. Wow, this thing is an absolute killer. Great beat, great rhythm, great guitar work, great production, and phenomenal lead vocals by Gene Simmons. Gene had kind of been struggling on the past couple of albums. I mean, honestly, ever since Rock and Roll Over, I don't think he has had the best song on any of the 4 albums that followed that. Love Gun, Dynasty, Unmasked, and Music from the Elder. I Love It Loud is definitely the big hit single from this album. It is Gene's purely, well, actually someone else co-wrote it with them, but they're not officially in the band. It was also co-written by Vinnie Vincent, which I'll talk about in a second. But this, through and through, is Gene's song, and it is an absolute beast. It appears on most of the greatest hits records, and they play this regularly in concert. No complaints there. This thing is balls to the wall. Then we come to the ballad of the album, Paul Stanley's I Still Love You. Now, Kiss has done ballads in the past, and they have worked very, very well, such as Beth and Hard Luck Woman. They've also done some ballads in the past that did not work very well, like Shandy. Boy, I do not like that song. This falls into the former category. This is a good ballad. Even though it's a ballad, it's still heavy. It's a very dark and brooding ballad, but it totally works. I mean, you wouldn't have thought that heavy metal could produce a ballad, but here you go. I Still Love You. If I were to make a Kiss Greatest Hits compilation, actually I have, but it's just on a burn CD. I Still Love You was on there. Then we move to Killer. It's a very, very fast song, and it is also sung by Gene Simmons, and it's okay. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first 2 songs, I Love It Loud and I Still Love You, but Killer is very good for what it is. But then it concludes with War Machine. Oh yeah, slow but heavy and dark. This thing is awesome. Gene sings the final song. This thing is a masterpiece. I love War Machine. And believe it or not, over the past couple of years or so, they have started bringing this one back when they perform in concert. I think the first time I heard them play this one was 2013 or 2014, and they have played it every single time I've seen them since then. They usually have a tank out there on stage that's spitting fire. It is an absolute killer. Well, Killer is a killer, but War Machine is also a killer. Gene totally sets the right mood. His dark, gloomy voice is perfect for this song, and I absolutely do recommend War Machine. What's my favorite from side 2? I Love It Loud and War Machine are definitely the top contenders, but I'm probably giving the edge to I Love It Loud. But no disrespect at all to War Machine. It's a great song, and I am planning to hear it again the next time I see him in concert, which sadly, as it sounds, may be the last. But never say never. That's what I always say. So anyways, what was I saying earlier about the cover art? Well, you can see right here from the looks of it, you would think that Ace Frehley is, playing lead guitar on all of these songs. And you would be wrong. Ace had pretty much given up the band by this point. He was working on an exit strategy. He was basically turning in his papers and parting ways because he was so disgruntled with the past 3 releases and the direction the band was taking. Ace has nothing to do with this album. Most of the guitar work was handled by Vinnie Vincent, who would become a full member of the band on the Creatures of the Night tour and the following album, Lick It Up. And so the cover is a little bit deceptive because Ace does not perform on a single song. Session musicians take over Ace's role. The most prominent one was Vinnie Vincent. Yes, that Vinnie Vincent. And I probably will be talking about him in more detail on another episode, but he was actually the one playing guitar on most of these songs. I know he performed on I Love It Loud, I Still Love You, and Killer, and I'm sure he performed on other songs as well. But that is actually session musicians playing the lead guitar, and Vinnie is doing the majority of it from what I understand. So anyways, do I recommend this album? I absolutely do. I already did a Kiss ranking album video, and I ranked this one 3rd. I stand by that decision. I put it below Destroyer and the debut, but this thing is one of the greatest Kiss albums ever, and it's one of my favorite albums ever. A lot of times it slips through the cracks just because of when it came out. It came out during a time when Kiss was kind of losing steam, but I fully recommend this one. This is right up there with their classic material, and I think you should listen to it. Anyways, thanks for joining me tonight. Next time, we're going to do an episode of Face Off, but until then, have a very pleasant evening.